The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk of Brownwood, Texas, as 12-year-old Dylan Parker walked home from school. His backpack, worn at the seams and patched with duct tape, hung heavy on his thin shoulders. The September heat was relentless, causing beads of sweat to form on his forehead as he navigated the familiar streets of his small hometown. Dylan paused in front of Henderson's Bakery, a modest establishment that had been serving the community for over 30 years. The aroma of fresh bread and pastries wafted through the screen door, making his stomach growl. He hadn't eaten much for lunch, just the free meal provided by the school, which today had been a dry chicken sandwich and an apple. He pressed his face against the glass window, watching as Jennifer Henderson, the owner's daughter, arranged colorful cupcakes in the display case. Through the window, Dylan could see a small pile of baked goods on the back counter. Items that were a day or two old, destined for the dumpster. His birthday was in 3 days, on Saturday, and he knew there would be no celebration. His grandmother, Carol Parker, was working double shifts at the nursing home and weekends at the grocery store just to keep their small rental house and pay the mounting bills that never seemed to stop coming. The bell above the door chimed as Dylan pushed it open. Jennifer looked up from behind the counter, her friendly smile faltering slightly when she saw the boy's worn clothing and hopeful expression. At 28, Jennifer had taken over the bakery after her father's heart attack last year, and she knew most of the families in town, including the Parkers. "Hi, Dylan," she said warmly. "What can I do for you today?" Dylan shuffled his feet, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. He had rehearsed this moment in his head during the entire walk from school, but now that he was here, the words felt heavy and shameful on his tongue. "Miss Henderson," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I was wondering, would you have an old cake for my birthday? One that you're gonna throw away? It's okay if it's not perfect. I turned 12 on Saturday, and my grandma, she's working real hard, and I don't want to ask her for money because..." His voice cracked, and he stopped talking, staring down at his scuffed sneakers that were 2 sizes too small. The silence in the bakery felt deafening. Jennifer's heart ached at the request. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a deep voice came from the corner of the shop. "Son, come here for a minute." Dylan turned to see a man sitting at one of the small tables near the window. He wore a pressed white shirt, crisp blue jeans, and a tan cowboy hat that partially shadowed his face. The man was tall, probably in his 70s, with kind eyes that seemed to hold decades of stories. There was something familiar about him, but Dylan couldn't quite place it. The man gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit down. Let's talk." Dylan hesitated, glancing at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. He slowly walked over and sat down, clutching his backpack on his lap like a shield. The man extended his hand. "Name's George. George Strait. What's yours?" Dylan's eyes widened in recognition. Every kid in Texas knew who George Strait was, the king of country music, a living legend whose songs had been the soundtrack to millions of lives. His father had played George Strait's music constantly in their old pickup truck, singing along to "Amarillo by Morning" and "The Chair" during their weekend fishing trips. I'm Dylan, sir. Dylan Parker." His hand trembled as he shook George's calloused palm. George smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Dylan Parker. That's a good, strong name. Now, I couldn't help but overhear what you asked Miss Henderson. You got a birthday coming up?" Dylan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Yes, sir. Saturday. I'll be 12. 12's an important age," George said thoughtfully. "That's when a boy starts becoming a young man. Lots of responsibility comes with that." He paused, studying Dylan's face. "Tell me about your family, Dylan. Who do you live with?" The question opened a floodgate that Dylan hadn't expected. Maybe it was the kindness in George's voice, or maybe it was the fact that this stranger, this famous stranger, was treating him like he mattered. Whatever the reason, Dylan found himself talking. "I live with my grandma Carol. My parents, they died 2 years ago. Car accident on Highway 377. A drunk driver crossed the center line." Dylan's voice remained steady, though his eyes glistened. "My mom, Rebecca Parker, she was a nurse. My dad, James Parker, he worked construction. They were coming home from a date night when it happened." George listened without interrupting, his expression solemn. "Grandma took me in right away," Dylan continued. "She's 67, but she works at Meadowbrook Nursing Home during the week and at Piggly Wiggly on weekends. She tries real hard, but money's tight. The insurance from my parents' accident helped for a while, but medical bills and the funeral costs, it all went pretty fast." He looked down at his hands. "I don't want to be a burden. That's why I thought maybe I could just have an old cake, you know? Something that was gonna be thrown away anyway. I don't need anything fancy." George was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed the boy's story. He had seen hardship before, had known poverty in his own youth, but there was something about Dylan's quiet dignity and selflessness that struck a chord deep within him. "Dylan, I'm in town for a benefit concert tomorrow night at the community center, raising money for the Children's Hospital in Abilene." George leaned forward. "How would you feel about being my special guest? Backstage pass, the whole works. And we'll make sure your grandma can come too." Dylan's mouth fell open. "Really? But why would you do that for me?" "Because every boy deserves to feel special on his birthday," George said simply. "And because I can see you're the kind of young man who thinks about others before himself. That's rare, and it should be celebrated." He stood up and walked to the counter, pulling out his wallet. "Jennifer, I'd like to order a custom birthday cake for Saturday. 3 layers, chocolate with buttercream frosting. Can you have it ready by noon?" Jennifer nodded enthusiastically, her eyes misty. "Absolutely, Mr. Strait. It'll be beautiful." George turned back to Dylan. "Now, I need your grandma's phone number so I can call her and arrange everything. And Dylan, no more asking for old cake. You hear me? You've got value, son, and don't you ever forget it." Dylan couldn't stop the tears that rolled down his cheeks. For the first time in 2 years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." As Dylan wrote down his grandmother's number on a napkin, he didn't notice the other customers in the bakery who had witnessed the entire exchange. Word would spread quickly through Brownwood. It always did in small towns. And by evening, the story of George Strait and the boy who asked for an old cake would be on everyone's lips. Outside, the Texas sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Dylan walked home with a lightness in his step he hadn't felt in years, his heart full of hope, and his mind swirling with the impossible reality that George Strait, the George Strait, had just changed his world. When he arrived at the small, weathered house on Elm Street, he found his grandmother sitting on the porch, still in her nursing home scrubs. Carol Parker was a petite woman with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, her face lined with the exhaustion of too many hours worked and too many worries carried. "Grandma!" Dylan called out, running up the wooden steps. "You won't believe what just happened." Carol looked up from the bills she was sorting, concern flickering across her features. "What is it, honey? Is everything all right?" "Better than all right." Dylan sat down next to her, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I met George Strait at Henderson's Bakery, the real George Strait. And he invited us to his concert tomorrow night, and he bought me a birthday cake and—" "Slow down, Carol said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "George Strait? Dylan, are you sure it wasn't someone who just looked like him?" Before Dylan could answer, Carol's cell phone, an ancient flip phone that barely held a charge, rang. She answered it hesitantly. "Hello." Dylan watched as his grandmother's expression shifted from skepticism to shock to disbelief. She listened for several minutes, occasionally murmuring yes and "I understand" and "thank you so much." When she hung up, she stared at Dylan with tears streaming down her face. "That was George Strait. He told me what happened at the bakery. He's sending a car for us tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. He said..." Her voice broke. "He said he was touched by your humility and wanted to do something special for your birthday." Grandmother and grandson embraced on that worn porch, holding each other tight as the evening shadows grew longer. Neither of them could have known that this was just the beginning, that George Strait's kindness would ripple through their lives and their community in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Inside the house, on the living room wall, hung a faded photograph of Dylan with his parents at the county fair, all three of them laughing at something just outside the frame. The picture had been taken 3 months before the accident. Dylan looked at it every day, remembering his father's terrible jokes, his mother's infectious laugh, the way they had made even ordinary moments feel magical. Tomorrow, he would create a new memory, one that his parents would never see, but would surely have celebrated. And somehow, in the mysterious way that grief sometimes allows, Dylan felt that they knew, and they were smiling. The following evening arrived with a spectacular sunset that turned the Texas sky into a canvas of deep purples and fiery oranges. Dylan had barely slept the night before, his mind racing with anticipation and disbelief. He had spent the morning helping his grandmother with household chores, neither of them speaking much, both processing the surreal turn their lives had taken. At 5:30, Carol emerged from her bedroom wearing the only dress she owned, a simple navy blue number that she usually reserved for church on the rare Sundays she wasn't working. She had applied a modest amount of makeup, and her silver hair was styled in soft waves instead of her usual practical bun. Dylan thought she looked beautiful. "You look really nice, Grandma," he said sincerely. Carol's cheeks flushed with pleasure. "Thank you, sweetheart. You clean up pretty well yourself." Dylan glanced down at his outfit. Khaki pants that Carol had found at the thrift store last month, and a button-down shirt that had belonged to his father. It was slightly too big, but Carol had tucked it in neatly, and with a brown belt, it looked presentable. His shoes were still worn, but he had scrubbed them clean until they looked almost new. At precisely 6 o'clock, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of their house. The driver, a friendly man in his 40s named Richard Coleman, got out and opened the back door for them. "Mrs. Parker, Dylan, good evening. Mr. Strait sent me to bring you to the venue. There's water and snacks in the back if you'd like." The drive to the Brownwood Community Center took only 15 minutes, but it felt like a journey into another world. Dylan pressed his face against the tinted window, watching the familiar streets of his hometown roll by. When they arrived, he saw that the parking lot was already packed with cars and trucks, and a line of people stretched around the building. Richard drove past the main entrance and pulled up to a side door marked "Artists Only." A security guard checked a clipboard and waved them through. Inside, the backstage area was a flurry of activity. Crew members rushed back and forth with equipment, musicians tuned their instruments, and the air hummed with pre-show energy. "Dylan! Mrs. Parker!" They turned to see George Strait walking toward them, looking every bit the country music icon in a black shirt, perfectly fitted jeans, and his signature cowboy hat. His smile was genuine and warm. "I'm so glad you could make it," George said, shaking Carol's hand and then putting a hand on Dylan's shoulder. "How are you feeling, young man? Nervous? Excited?" "Both," Dylan admitted, his voice slightly shaky. George laughed. "That's the perfect combination. Come on, let me show you around before the show starts." For the next 30 minutes, George gave them a personal tour of the backstage area. He introduced them to his band members, including Tommy Hicks on lead guitar, who let Dylan hold his instrument and showed him a few basic chords. They met the sound engineer, Paul Ramirez, who explained how all the technical equipment worked. Everyone they encountered was friendly and welcoming, treating Dylan not as an intruder but as an honored guest. "Mr. Strait," Carol said at one point, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you for this. After everything Dylan's been through, after everything we've been through, this kindness, it means more than I can express." George's expression grew serious. "Mrs. Parker, I lost my daughter, Jennifer, in a car accident back in 1986. She was only 13. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "I know the weight of that kind of loss. I know how it changes everything. And I know how important it is to hold on to moments of joy, especially for young people who've had to grow up too fast." Carol's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm so sorry. I had forgotten. I didn't mean to bring up painful memories." "Don't apologize," George said gently. "That pain never really goes away. But over time, you learn to carry it differently. And you learn that honoring those we've lost means living fully, loving deeply, and helping others when we can." That's what Dylan reminded me of yesterday, the importance of simple kindness. A crew member approached. "Mr. Strait, we're ready for you in 10 minutes. George nodded and turned back to Dylan and Carol. "All right, I've got to get ready for the show. I've arranged for you two to have seats in the front row. But first, Dylan, how would you feel about coming on stage with me during one of the songs?" Dylan's eyes went wide. "On stage? In front of everyone?" "Only if you want to," George assured him. "No pressure, but I thought it might be a good early birthday present." Dylan looked at his grandmother, who smiled and nodded encouragingly. He took a deep breath. "Okay. Yes, I'll do it." "That's my boy," George said with a grin. "During the 5th song, The Chair, I'll introduce you and bring you out. You don't have to do anything except stand there and wave. Can you handle that?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now go enjoy the show." Richard escorted Dylan and Carol to their seats at the front of the audience. The community center was packed with nearly 2,000 people, all buzzing with excitement. The lights dimmed, and the crowd erupted into applause as George Strait and his band took the stage. The first 4 songs were electric. George performed Amarillo by Morning, All My Exes Live in Texas, Oceanfront Property, and I Cross My Heart, with the skill and showmanship that had made him a legend. Dylan sang along to every word, his earlier nervousness melting away into pure joy. Carol watched her grandson's face, seeing a happiness there that had been absent for too long. Then came The Chair. George began playing the familiar opening chords, and the audience swayed and sang along. Halfway through the second verse, he paused the music. "Folks, I want to take a moment to tell you about a young man I met yesterday," George said into the microphone, his voice carrying through the venue. "His name is Dylan Parker, and he's turning 12 years old this Saturday." The spotlight swept across the audience and landed on Dylan, who froze in his seat. The crowd applauded. "Dylan, can you come up here, son?" With trembling legs, Dylan stood and made his way to the stage stairs. George met him there and helped him up, keeping a steady hand on his shoulder. "Dylan walked into Henderson's Bakery yesterday," George continued, addressing the crowd, "and he asked if they had an old cake, one they were going to throw away, that he could have for his birthday. Now, let me tell you why that matters. Dylan here has been living with his grandmother, Carol Parker, since he lost both his parents in a car accident 2 years ago. The audience grew silent, the weight of the story settling over them. Carol works 2 jobs to provide for this young man, and Dylan, instead of complaining or feeling sorry for himself, was thinking about how not to be a burden. He was willing to take someone's trash just so he could have a small moment of celebration. George's voice was thick with emotion. That kind of humility and selflessness is rare, and I believe it should be celebrated. So, Brownwood, let's wish Dylan Parker a very happy early birthday. The crowd erupted into applause and cheers. People stood, clapping and calling out birthday wishes. Dylan stood there, overwhelmed, tears streaming down his face. George pulled him into a hug, and the band began playing Happy Birthday. 2,000 voices joined in, singing to a boy who had asked for nothing more than an old cake. When the song ended, George spoke into Dylan's ear, though the microphone picked it up. "You matter, Dylan. Don't ever forget that." Dylan managed to whisper back, "Thank you, Mr. Strait." As Dylan returned to his seat, wiping his eyes, the concert continued. But something had shifted in the room. The audience, moved by the story, seemed more connected, more present. During the intermission, several people approached Carol and Dylan, offering words of encouragement and support. An elderly man named Frank Bennett, who owned Bennett's Hardware on Main Street, pressed a $50 bill into Carol's hand. "For the boy," he said gruffly. "Every kid deserves a proper birthday." A woman named Patricia Wells, who ran the local diner, wrote her phone number on a napkin and handed it to Carol. "Bring Dylan by on Saturday. Lunch is on the house." Throughout the second half of the show, more people stopped by with small gifts. A gift card here, a handshake there, words of kindness and solidarity. By the time George finished his final encore with "The Cowboy Rides Away," Dylan and Carol had received over $300 in cash, a dozen gift cards, and countless offers of help. After the show, Richard drove them back home, but not before George stopped by to say goodnight. "How was it?" he asked Dylan. "It was the best night of my life," Dylan said honestly. "I'll never forget it. Never." George crouched down to Dylan's eye level. "Listen to me, son. You've got a hard road ahead. Growing up without your parents, it's not going to be easy. But you've got something special inside you. Character, kindness, strength. Don't lose that. And remember, asking for help isn't weakness. It's wisdom." He stood and shook Carol's hand. "Mrs. Parker, you're raising a fine young man. If you ever need anything, you have my number." "We can't thank you enough," Carol said, her voice breaking. "You don't have to thank me. Just take care of each other." As they drove away, Dylan watched George Strait's figure grow smaller in the side mirror. He thought about everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. The fear and shame of asking for an old cake. The unexpected kindness of a stranger who turned out to be a legend. The overwhelming support of his community. When they arrived home, Carol and Dylan sat together on the living room couch, counting the money people had given them. It totaled $347. "This is enough to pay our electric bill this month," Carol said, incredulous. "And still have money left over for your birthday." "We should save some of it," Dylan suggested. "For emergencies." Carol pulled him close. "When did you get so grown up?" "I've had a good teacher," Dylan replied, resting his head on her shoulder. That night, Dylan lay in his small bedroom, staring at the ceiling. He thought about his father's words, spoken during one of their fishing trips. "Dylan, remember that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they do with what they've been given." His father had been talking about catching fish and throwing back the small ones, but now Dylan understood the deeper meaning. George Strait had been given talent, fame, and fortune. But what he had chosen to do with those gifts, the kindness, the humility, the generosity. That was what truly mattered. Dylan made a promise to himself that night. One day, when he was older and had the means, he would pay forward the kindness that George Strait and the people of Brownwood had shown him. He would remember what it felt like to be seen, valued, and celebrated. And he would make sure others felt that way too. As sleep finally claimed him, Dylan smiled. His birthday was still 2 days away, but he had already received the greatest gift imaginable: hope. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, with the kind of perfect weather that Texas is famous for in early fall. Dylan woke to the smell of bacon frying and coffee brewing, unusual for a household that typically started the day with toast and instant oatmeal. He padded into the kitchen to find his grandmother at the stove, wearing an apron and humming softly. On the counter sat ingredients for pancakes, a carton of fresh orange juice, and a small vase with wildflowers that must have come from their modest backyard. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Carol said, turning to embrace him. 12 years old. My goodness, where does the time go? "You didn't have to do all this, Grandma," Dylan said, though his stomach growled appreciatively at the sight and smell of the food. "Nonsense. It's your birthday. And after what George Strait did for us, I think we can afford a proper breakfast for once." She flipped a pancake expertly. "Besides, we've got a big day ahead. Jennifer Henderson called early this morning. Your cake is ready. And she said half the town is asking about you." Dylan's cheeks flushed. "Really? Really?" Apparently, the story from the concert has spread. The local newspaper, the Brownwood Bulletin, even wants to do a story. I told them maybe, but only if you're comfortable with it. Before Dylan could respond, there was a knock at the front door. Carol wiped her hands on her apron and went to answer it, returning moments later with Patricia Wells from the diner, who was carrying a large shopping bag. "Sorry to drop by so early," Patricia said with a warm smile. She was a stout woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "I wanted to give Dylan his birthday present before the lunch rush starts." She handed the bag to Dylan, who opened it carefully. Inside was a brand new backpack. Not expensive or fancy, but sturdy and clean, with multiple pockets and padded straps. There was also a set of school supplies: notebooks, pens, pencils, and a scientific calculator. "I remember you mentioning at the concert that you like math and science," Patricia said. "My nephew, he's a teacher at the middle school in the next town over, and he helped me pick out things that might be useful." Dylan's throat tightened with emotion. "Mrs. Wells, this is too much. I can't." "You can, and you will," Patricia interrupted gently. "That old backpack of yours is held together with duct tape and prayers. Every student deserves proper supplies. No arguments." She patted his shoulder. "Now, don't forget, lunch at the diner today at 1 o'clock. And bring your grandma." After Patricia left, more visitors arrived throughout the morning. Frank Bennett from the hardware store brought a toolbox with basic tools and a note that read, "Every young man should know how to fix things. Mrs." Angela Winters, Dylan's 6th grade English teacher, dropped off a collection of books, including adventure novels and biographies of successful people who had overcome adversity. By noon, the small living room was filled with birthday cards, small gifts, and the tangible evidence of a community that had been moved to action. Carol kept wiping her eyes, overwhelmed by the generosity of their neighbors. "I knew Brownwood was a good town," she said, "but I never realized how good until now." At 12:30, Dylan and Carol walked the 6 blocks to Henderson's Bakery to pick up the cake George Strait had ordered. The streets were busy with weekend shoppers, and several people stopped them to wish Dylan a happy birthday. It felt surreal. 2 days ago, Dylan had been invisible, just another struggling kid in a small town. Now, people knew his name and his story. When they entered the bakery, Jennifer Henderson greeted them with a huge smile. "The birthday boy. Come see what Mr. Strait ordered." She led them to the back, where a magnificent 3-layer chocolate cake sat on the counter. It was decorated with buttercream frosting in shades of blue and white, with "Happy 12th Birthday, Dylan," written in elegant script across the top. Small fondant musical notes adorned the sides, a nod to Dylan's love of country music. "Jennifer, this is beautiful," Carol breathed. "How much do we owe?" "Nothing." Mr. Strait took care of everything and left a very generous tip. Jennifer carefully placed the cake in a sturdy box. He also left this for Dylan. She handed Dylan a sealed envelope. With trembling hands, he opened it and pulled out a card. On the front was a picture of a cowboy on horseback, riding into a sunset. Inside, George had written in neat handwriting, "Dylan, happy 12th birthday. Remember, life will knock you down sometimes, but what defines you is whether you get back up. Keep being the kind, humble young man you are. The world needs more people like you. Your friend, George Strait. P.S. I've also set up a small savings account in your name at Brownwood Community Bank. Use it wisely, maybe for college someday. Details are with your grandmother." Dylan read the message 3 times, not quite believing it. He looked up at his grandmother, who was reading a separate letter that Jennifer had given her, her hand over her mouth in shock. "He put $5,000 in a savings account," Carol whispered. $5,000 for Dylan's education. She sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed. I can't. This is too much." Jennifer knelt beside her. "Mrs. Parker, George Strait is one of the most generous people I've ever met. He doesn't do things for publicity or recognition. He does them because he genuinely cares. Let him help. Let the town help. You've been carrying this weight alone for too long." Carol nodded, unable to speak, tears flowing freely. At 1 o'clock, Dylan and Carol walked into Patricia's diner, carrying the cake box carefully. The moment they entered, the entire restaurant burst into applause. The diner was packed, not just with regular lunch customers, but with people from the community who had come specifically to celebrate Dylan's birthday. A large banner hanging from the ceiling read, "Happy Birthday, Dylan." Balloons in blue and silver filled the corners. Every table was occupied, and people stood along the walls. Dylan recognized faces from school, the grocery store, the nursing home where his grandmother worked, and the concert 2 nights ago. Patricia emerged from the kitchen, beaming. "Surprise! We thought you deserved a proper party." For the next 2 hours, Dylan experienced something he hadn't felt since before his parents died. Pure, uncomplicated joy. People came up to share stories, offer advice, and express their support. His classmates, Kevin Walsh and Emma Rodriguez, showed up with a gift card to the local bookstore. His grandmother's co-workers from the nursing home presented him with a scrapbook they had made, filled with inspirational quotes and photos. The mayor of Brownwood, Russell Davidson, stopped by with his wife and gave a short speech about community values and how Dylan's humility had reminded the town of what truly mattered. "In a world that often celebrates arrogance and excess," the mayor said, "this young man showed us that there's strength in vulnerability and beauty in simplicity." When it was time to cut the cake, everyone gathered around. Dylan made a wish, not for money or possessions, but for the health and happiness of his grandmother, and for the wisdom to honor his parents' memory, and blew out the 12 candles in one breath. The crowd cheered. Later, as the party began to wind down, a man in his mid-30s approached Dylan. He had sandy brown hair, wore glasses, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his purpose. "Dylan, my name is Nathan Cross. I'm a guidance counselor at Brownwood Middle School." He shook Dylan's hand. I wanted to talk to you about something important. I've been speaking with your teachers, and they all say the same thing. You're bright, hardworking, and curious. Your math teacher, Mr. Lewis, says you're operating 2 grade levels ahead in his class. Dylan shrugged, embarrassed. I just like numbers. They make sense to me. That's a gift, Nathan said seriously. And gifts like that should be cultivated. I want to work with you and your grandmother to apply for some academic programs. Maybe a summer STEM camp next year, or tutoring opportunities that could prepare you for college. Mr. Strait's generous gift gives you options now. Let's make sure you use them wisely. Carol, who had been listening nearby, came over. We'd be very interested in that, Mr. Cross. Education was important to Dylan's parents. They would have wanted him to reach his full potential. Nathan handed her his business card. Call me next week. We'll set up a meeting and talk about Dylan's future. As the sun began to set and the party finally ended, Dylan helped Patricia and her staff clean up. He insisted on it, despite their protests. As he wiped down tables and stacked chairs, he reflected on the incredible change that had occurred in just 3 days. A simple question, would you have an old cake for my birthday? Had somehow unlocked a flood of kindness that was still overwhelming him. On the walk home, with the remains of the cake in a box and bags of leftover party supplies, Dylan and Carol moved slowly through the cooling evening air. The streetlights flickered on, casting warm pools of light along the sidewalk. "Grandma," Dylan said quietly, "do you think Mom and Dad know about all of this?" Carol stopped walking and looked at her grandson, seeing her own son reflected in his features. The same brown eyes, the same thoughtful expression. "I believe they do," she said finally. "And I believe they're proud of you. Not just for how you've handled this birthday, but for how you've handled everything. The grief, the struggles, the loss. You could have become bitter or angry, but instead, you became kind and thoughtful. That's their legacy living on in you." They walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they reached their small house on Elm Street, they found one more surprise waiting on the porch. A large gift basket wrapped in cellophane, tied with a silver bow. The card read, "To Dylan and Carol, may this birthday be the first of many joyful celebrations to come. You are not alone." Signed, the people of Brownwood. Inside the basket were groceries, quality items they normally couldn't afford, along with more gift cards, homemade cookies, and a beautiful handwritten book filled with birthday messages from dozens of community members. That night, after the house was quiet and Dylan was supposed to be asleep, he snuck out to the living room where the photograph of his parents hung on the wall. He stood there in his pajamas, looking at their frozen, smiling faces. "We're going to be okay," he whispered to them. "Grandma and me, we're going to be okay. And I'm going to make you proud. I promise." In his bedroom, in a new journal that Mrs. Winters had given him, Dylan wrote his first entry. "My 12th birthday was today. It was the best day I've had since the accident. I learned that asking for help isn't shameful. It's brave. I learned that kindness creates more kindness, like ripples in a pond. Most importantly, I learned that I'm not alone. Mr. Strait saw me when I felt invisible. He helped me when I felt helpless. Someday, I'm going to do that for someone else. This is my promise." He closed the journal and turned off his bedside lamp, falling asleep with a smile on his face and hope in his heart. Monday morning brought an unexpected development. Dylan walked into Brownwood Middle School to find a newspaper dispenser near the entrance displaying the latest edition of the Brownwood Bulletin. On the front page, above the fold, was a large photograph of him standing on stage with George Strait, and the headline read, "Country Legend Touches Local Boy's Life. A Story of Humility and kindness. Students crowded around the dispenser, reading the article and talking excitedly. When Dylan approached, several of his classmates turned to look at him. Some smiled and called out greetings. Others stared with curiosity, or what might have been envy. The article, written by journalist Claire Montgomery, detailed Dylan's story with sensitivity and depth. She had interviewed Jennifer Henderson, Patricia Wells, Mayor Davidson, and even Carol Parker. The piece painted a vivid picture of Dylan's circumstances, George Strait's intervention, and the community's heartwarming response. It ended with a quote from George himself, obtained through his publicist. "Dylan Parker represents the best of what young people can be: humble, resilient, and considerate of others. It was my honor to celebrate his birthday with him and to see a community rally around one of its own. That's the Texas spirit I've always believed in." By lunchtime, the story had spread beyond Brownwood. Regional television stations called the school asking for interviews. Social media picked up the article, and it began circulating on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. By the end of the school day, the hashtag #DylanStory was trending locally. The attention was both wonderful and overwhelming. Dylan found himself approached constantly by classmates who suddenly wanted to be his friend, by teachers offering extra help and encouragement, by students from other grades asking for his autograph, or wanting to take selfies with him. In his 6th period English class, Mrs. Winters asked him to stay after the bell rang. "How are you handling all of this?" she asked with concern. "It's a lot for anyone, especially someone your age." Dylan thought about it carefully. "It's weird," he admitted. "Last week, nobody noticed me. Now everybody wants to talk to me. But I'm the same person I was before." "That's very mature of you to recognize," Mrs. Winters said. "Remember this feeling. Stay grounded. Don't let the attention change who you are at your core. And know that when the spotlight moves on, and it will, the people who truly care about you will still be there." Her words proved prophetic. Over the next few days, the media attention intensified. A news crew from the Dallas-Fort Worth affiliate came to Brownwood to film a segment. They interviewed Dylan, Carol, and several community members. The piece aired on the evening news and was picked up by other stations across Texas and beyond. George Strait's management team called to check on Dylan and make sure the media attention wasn't too intrusive. They offered to release a statement asking the press to respect the family's privacy if needed. But Carol declined. "Let people hear the story," she said. "Maybe it will inspire others to be kind." Indeed, the story did inspire others. Henderson's Bakery reported that multiple customers had started a pay-it-forward tradition, buying extra pastries to be given free to anyone who couldn't afford them. Patricia's Diner began a community meals program, serving free dinners every Thursday to families in need. Bennett's Hardware set up a scholarship fund for local students pursuing technical careers. But not all the attention was positive. By the second week, some voices on social media began questioning the narrative. Anonymous commenters accused Carol of exploiting her grandson for money. Others suggested that the whole thing was a publicity stunt orchestrated by George Strait's team. A particularly cruel blog post claimed that Dylan had manipulated the situation by deliberately asking for an old cake in a public place where someone famous might hear. Dylan tried not to read the negative comments, but it was impossible to avoid them completely. One particularly painful message, posted on the school's Facebook page, came from someone using a fake account. "So this kid begs for cake and gets thousands of dollars? What about the rest of us who actually work hard? This is ridiculous. He's just playing the sympathy card." The comment had been shared and liked by several people, including some who attended Brownwood Middle School. Dylan felt sick when he saw it. At home that evening, he was unusually quiet during dinner. Carol noticed immediately. "What's wrong, honey?" Dylan pushed food around his plate. "Some people online are saying mean things. They're saying I'm taking advantage, that I'm just looking for handouts, that I don't deserve what Mr. Strait did for me." Carol set down her fork, her expression serious. "Dylan, look at me." Sutans, when he met her eyes, she continued, "There will always be people who want to tear down anything good. It makes them feel better about their own lives. But here's what you need to remember. You didn't ask George Strait for anything, except an old cake that was going to be thrown away. You didn't manipulate anyone. You were just being honest about your situation. Everything that followed was other people choosing to be kind. You can't control how others interpret your story, but you can control how you respond to it. But what if they're right?" Dylan's voice was small. "What if I don't deserve all this attention?" "Deserve?" Carol's voice rose slightly. "Dylan James Parker, listen to me. You've lost both your parents. You've watched me work myself to exhaustion trying to keep us afloat. You've gone without things other kids take for granted. You've maintained good grades and a positive attitude despite everything. You've shown kindness and consideration even when you had every reason to be angry at the world. If anyone deserves a break, it's you." Dylan nodded, but the doubt lingered. The next day at school, things came to a head. During lunch, Dylan sat at his usual table with Kevin Walsh and Emma Rodriguez, who had been his friends since elementary school. Real friends from before the George Strait incident. A group of 8th graders approached, led by Travis Kimball, a boy known for being a bully. Travis was tall for his age, with an athletic build and a constant sneer that suggested he found the world beneath him. "Hey, it's the famous Dylan Parker," Travis said mockingly. "Can I have your autograph? Or maybe you can cry me a river, so some rich guy will give me free stuff too." The cafeteria grew quiet. Other students turned to watch. Dylan felt his face flush, but he kept his voice steady. "I didn't ask for any of this, Travis." "Right," Travis scoffed. "You just happened to ask for a cake in front of a famous singer. Total coincidence. Face it, Parker, you're a professional victim." Emma stood up, her eyes flashing. "Leave him alone, Travis. You're just jealous because nobody would ever do something nice for you with that attitude." "Stay out of it, Rodriguez," Travis snapped. Then to Dylan, "You know what? My dad lost his job 3 months ago. We're struggling too. But you don't see me begging for handouts in public places." Something shifted in Dylan. He stood up slowly, looking Travis directly in the eye. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "I'm sorry about your dad's job. That must be really hard." Dylan's sincerity caught Travis off guard. "And you're right. I did ask for something I couldn't afford. I asked because my grandmother works 2 jobs and still can't make ends meet. I asked because I didn't want her to feel guilty about not being able to give me a birthday cake. I asked because I've learned that there's no shame in needing help." He paused, letting his words sink in. "If you're struggling, Travis, there's no shame in that either. The community programs that started because of my story, they're for everyone who needs them, including you and your family. Being tough doesn't mean you have to suffer alone." Travis's expression wavered, confusion and anger battling across his features. For a moment, Dylan thought he might swing a punch. But then something changed. Travis's shoulders sagged slightly, and the aggression drained from his posture. "Whatever," Travis muttered, turning away. But as he walked off, one of his friends clapped him on the shoulder and whispered something. Dylan couldn't hear it, but he saw Travis nod. Later, Mr. Cross, the guidance counselor, pulled Dylan aside. "I heard what happened in the cafeteria," the lunch monitor told me. "I want you to know that you handled that with remarkable maturity." "I just told the truth," Dylan said. "Sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do." Mr. Cross studied him thoughtfully. You know, Dylan, this experience you're going through, the attention, the criticism, the support, it's teaching you lessons that most people don't learn until they're much older. How to handle public scrutiny, how to stay true to yourself despite what others say, how to extend grace even to those who don't extend it to you. Those are valuable skills. That evening, Dylan received an unexpected phone call. Carol handed him the phone with a surprised expression. "It's for you. It's George Strait." Dylan's heart leaped as he took the phone. "Hello? Dylan, it's George. How are you holding up?" The familiar voice was warm and concerned. "I'm okay," Dylan said, though his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "I've been keeping tabs on the media coverage. My team told me about some of the negative comments online. I wanted to check in and make sure you're all right." Dylan felt a lump in his throat. Some people are saying mean things, that I'm taking advantage, that I don't deserve everything that's happened. George was quiet for a moment. "Dylan, let me tell you something I've learned in 50 years of public life. You can't please everyone. There will always be critics, always be people who misunderstand your intentions or project their own issues onto your story. What matters is that you know the truth about yourself. You know why you asked for that cake. You know that you weren't trying to manipulate anyone. You were just a kid who wanted something small to celebrate your birthday. But what if?" "No what ifs," George interrupted gently. "Here's what I know. I saw a young man who has been through more hardship than most adults face in a lifetime. I saw humility and grace. I saw someone worthy of kindness. And I chose to offer that kindness not because you begged for it, but because you inspired me. That's on me, not you. You don't carry the weight of my choices or anyone else's." Dylan wiped his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Strait, for everything." "You're welcome, son. Now, I want you to do something for me. I want you to write down your experience, all of it. The good, the bad, the lessons you're learning. Maybe someday you'll look back on it and realize how much you've grown. Or maybe you'll share it with someone else who needs to hear it. Either way, don't let this moment be wasted." After they hung up, Dylan sat at his small desk and opened the journal Mrs. Winters had given him. He wrote for over an hour, pouring out his thoughts and feelings, documenting the whirlwind of the past 2 weeks. When he finally set down his pen, he felt lighter. The criticism still stung, but it no longer felt crushing. He had been reminded of something important. His worth wasn't determined by strangers' opinions or social media comments. It was rooted in something deeper, in the values his parents had instilled, in the love his grandmother showed him, in the character he chose to embody each day. The next morning, Dylan walked into school with his head held high. He greeted Travis Kimball in the hallway with a simple "Good morning," which earned a surprised nod in return. He thanked his teachers for their support and told his real friends how much he appreciated them. At lunch, as he sat with Kevin and Emma, the cafeteria television, which usually played ESPN, was tuned to a national morning show. Suddenly, Dylan saw his own face on the screen. The segment was titled, "The Power of Asking: How One Boy's Humble Request Started a Movement." It featured interviews with George Strait, Mayor Davidson, and Carol, interspersed with footage of the community programs that had been started in Dylan's honor. The piece ended with a challenge. What would happen if we all had the courage to be as honest about our needs as Dylan Parker? And what would happen if we all responded with the generosity that George Strait and the people of Brownwood showed? The cafeteria erupted in applause. Students Dylan barely knew came up to shake his hand or pat his back. Even Travis Kimball, watching from across the room, gave a small nod of acknowledgement. In that moment, Dylan understood something profound. His story was no longer just about him. It had become something larger, a reminder of human kindness, community strength, and the courage it takes to be vulnerable. He might not have asked for that responsibility, but he could choose to embrace it. And that's exactly what he decided to do. 3 months after Dylan's 12th birthday, winter settled over Brownwood, bringing cooler temperatures and clear, starlit nights. The media attention had finally faded, moving on to other stories, other viral moments. Life had returned to a new kind of normal for Dylan and Carol. A normal that included better circumstances thanks to the community's continued support and George Strait's generous gift. Carol had been able to reduce her hours at the grocery store, now working only at the nursing home during the week. The financial breathing room allowed her to actually sit down for dinner with Dylan most evenings, and to be less exhausted, less worried. The house felt warmer somehow, not just because they could afford to run the heat more often, but because hope had moved in alongside them. Dylan had thrown himself into his studies with renewed focus. True to his word, Mr. Cross had connected him with advanced academic programs. He was now taking a high school-level algebra course online and attending a Saturday STEM club at the community college in the next town over. His teachers marveled at his dedication and natural aptitude for mathematics and science. But something else had changed in Dylan. Something deeper than academic achievement or improved circumstances. The experience with George Strait and the subsequent media attention had taught him about the power of kindness and the importance of passing it on. He had become acutely aware of suffering around him, and he felt compelled to do something about it. It started small. Dylan began volunteering at the nursing home where his grandmother worked, spending Saturday mornings reading to residents who had no family visitors. He discovered that Mrs. Helen Brennan, a 92-year-old former school teacher, loved poetry, but could no longer see well enough to read. So Dylan came every week to read her favorite poets: Robert Frost, Maya Angelou, Emily Dickinson. "You remind me of my grandson," Mrs. Brennan told him one morning, her cloudy eyes distant with memory. "He died in Vietnam in 1968. Would have been about your age when he enlisted. You have the same gentle spirit he had." Dylan learned that small acts of presence, simply being there, listening, caring, could mean as much as grand gestures. He applied the same principle at school, befriending students who seemed isolated or struggling. When he noticed that Caleb Morrison, a quiet 7th grader, always sat alone at lunch, Dylan invited him to join his table. He discovered that Caleb was navigating his parents' recent divorce and felt caught between 2 homes, 2 lives. "I know what it's like to feel alone," Dylan told him simply. And just like that, Caleb had a friend. In mid-December, Dylan approached his grandmother with an idea that had been forming for weeks. "Grandma, I've been thinking about the money Mr. Strait put in the savings account for my college. It's a lot of money, more than I ever dreamed of having, and I'm so grateful for it. But I keep thinking about other kids like me, kids who are struggling and might not get a George Strait moment." Carol looked at him curiously. "What are you thinking?" "What if we used some of that money, not all of it, but some, to help other families? Like, what if we could buy Christmas presents for kids whose parents can't afford them? Or pay someone's electric bill so they don't have to choose between heat and food?" Carol's eyes filled with tears. "Dylan, that money is for your future, your education. I know, and I still want to use most of it for college. But Mr. Strait told me that paying forward kindness matters. And wouldn't my parents want me to help others, if I could?" Carol pulled him into a tight embrace. "Your parents would be so incredibly proud of you. Yes, let's do it. But we'll be smart about it. We'll create a small fund, maybe $500, and use it strategically to help a few families this Christmas. The rest stays saved for your education." They called it the Parker Family Kindness Fund, and they partnered with Mr. Cross at the school to identify families in genuine need. They learned about the Rodriguez family, Emma's distant cousins, who had recently moved to Brownwood after fleeing domestic violence. The mother, Isabella Rodriguez, was working minimum wage at a local factory and trying to provide for 3 children in a cramped one-bedroom apartment. Dylan and Carol showed up at their door 2 weeks before Christmas, with bags of groceries, wrapped presents for each child, and a gift card to the local thrift store for Isabella. "Who? Why are you doing this?" Isabella asked, overwhelmed and suspicious in equal measure. "Because someone did it for us," Dylan said simply. "And because everyone deserves to feel remembered during the holidays." They helped another family, the Wilsons, whose house had been damaged in a small fire in November. Insurance was covering most of the repairs, but the family had lost many of their possessions, including clothes and furniture. Dylan and Carol organized a donation drive through the middle school, collecting gently used items and new essentials. Word spread about Dylan's efforts, and others joined in. Patricia Wells donated meals from the diner. Bennett's Hardware provided building supplies at cost. Jennifer Henderson made sure every family Dylan helped received a free cake from the bakery. On Christmas Eve, Dylan found himself back at the community center, but this time not as a recipient of kindness, as a volunteer. The town was hosting a holiday dinner for families in need, and Dylan had signed up to serve food and help with activities for younger children. As he ladled mashed potatoes onto plates and smiled at the grateful faces in line, Dylan felt a deep sense of purpose. This was what George Strait had given him, not just money or attention, but a template for living, a model of how to be human in a world that so often felt harsh and indifferent. During a quiet moment, Mayor Davidson approached him. "Dylan Parker, I've been watching what you've been doing. The volunteering, the kindness fund, the way you've carried yourself through all of this. You've got the heart of a leader." Dylan shrugged, embarrassed. "I'm just trying to help." "That's what leadership is," the mayor said. "Seeing a need and meeting it, without waiting for someone else to take charge. Keep it up, son. This town needs people like you." After dinner, as families were leaving, a woman approached Dylan hesitantly. She was thin, with tired eyes and work-worn hands. She carried a young girl, maybe 5 years old, on her hip. "Are you Dylan Parker?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Rebecca Lawson. This is my daughter, Grace." The little girl buried her face in her mother's shoulder shyly. "I wanted to thank you. We were one of the families that received help from your kindness fund. The toys you bought for Grace, she thinks Santa brought them. She doesn't know that we couldn't have afforded Christmas this year because I lost my job in October. I was out of work for 6 weeks before I found this new position at the warehouse." Her voice cracked. "You saved our Christmas. You and your grandmother. I needed you to know what it meant to us." Dylan felt his own eyes stinging. "I'm glad we could help, Mrs. Lawson. I hope things get better for you and Grace." "They already are," she said, managing a smile. "I got promoted to shift supervisor last week. It's just a little more money, but it helps. And knowing that people like you exist, people who care about strangers, it gives me hope that Grace is growing up in a good world." After they left, Dylan stood in the now quiet community center, looking around at the decorations and empty tables. Carol came to stand beside him, putting her arm around his shoulders. "You did good today," she said softly. "We did good," Dylan corrected. "None of this would be possible without you, Grandma. You taught me what it means to work hard and care about others." They walked home through the cold December night, the streets lined with Christmas lights twinkling in windows. When they reached their small house on Elm Street, they found a package on the porch. It was wrapped in plain brown paper with Dylan's name written on it in familiar handwriting. Inside was a leather-bound journal, much finer than the one Mrs. Winters had given him, and a letter from George Strait. "Dylan, I've been keeping up with what you've been doing in Brownwood. My friend, the mayor, keeps me informed. I'm writing to tell you that I'm not surprised by your actions, but I am deeply proud of them. You've taken the kindness shown to you and multiplied it, creating ripples that will extend far beyond what you can see right now. This journal is for you to continue documenting your journey. Someday, when you're older, you might want to share your story with the world, not for fame or attention, but to remind people of what's possible when we choose compassion over indifference. I've also enclosed information about a scholarship program I've established through my foundation. It's for students who demonstrate both academic promise and a commitment to serving their communities. I'd like you to be the first recipient when you're ready for college. You've already proven that you're exactly the kind of young person this scholarship was created to support. Keep being you, Dylan. The world needs more people who ask for what they need with humility and give what they can with generosity. Your friend, George Strait." Also in the package was a formal certificate naming Dylan as the inaugural recipient of the Strait Foundation Leadership Scholarship, which would cover full tuition, room, and board at any Texas public university, plus a stipend for books and living expenses. Dylan read the letter 3 times, then carefully placed it in the new journal along with the certificate. He looked up at his grandmother, who had been reading over his shoulder. "This is too much," he whispered. "I don't deserve this." "Stop saying that," Carol said firmly. "You deserve every bit of it. Not because of what happened at the bakery, but because of what you've done since. Because of who you are." That night, Dylan wrote in his new journal, "In the past 3 months, I've learned that Brownwood isn't just my hometown, it's my family. Mr. Strait isn't just a famous singer. He's someone who saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. And all the people who've helped us, who've supported us, who've joined in paying kindness forward, they're all part of this extended family. I think that's what Mom and Dad would want me to understand. That we're never truly alone as long as we're willing to connect with others, to be vulnerable, to ask for help when we need it, and offer help when we can give it. Next year, I'll be 13. I'll keep working hard in school, keep volunteering, keep trying to make a difference, not because I have to prove anything to anyone, but because this is who I want to be. This is the legacy I want to build. I asked for an old cake, and I received a new life. Not because my circumstances changed, though they did, but because my perspective changed. I learned that there's strength in vulnerability, that community matters, that small acts of kindness can create waves of change. Thank you, Mr. Strait, for seeing me. Thank you, Grandma, for raising me. Thank you, Brownwood, for catching me when I fell. And thank you, Mom and Dad, for teaching me, even in your absence, what it means to be a good person. This is just the beginning of my story. I don't know where it will lead, but I know I won't walk it alone." Spring arrived in Brownwood with its usual flourish of wildflowers and warming temperatures. Dylan was finishing 7th grade with straight A's and had been accepted into a prestigious summer program at Texas A&M University for gifted students in mathematics. The program was fully funded through a combination of the university's financial aid and Mr. Cross's tireless advocacy. The Parker Family Kindness Fund had grown beyond Dylan and Carol's initial contribution. Community members had begun donating to it, and by April, the fund had helped 12 families with various needs: rent assistance, medical bills, school supplies, and emergency groceries. Patricia Wells had offered to manage the fund officially through her diner, making it easier for people to contribute and for families to receive help discreetly. One warm Saturday afternoon in May, Dylan was volunteering at the library's reading program for elementary students when Mr. Cross appeared with unexpected news. "Dylan, do you have a moment?" They stepped outside into the spring sunshine. Mr. Cross was smiling, which usually meant good news. "I received a call from a producer at the Today Show. They're doing a segment on young people making a difference in their communities, and they want to feature you. They'd like to fly you and your grandmother to New York for an interview." Dylan's stomach flipped. "The Today Show? That's national television." "It is, and I told them I'd check with you first. After everything that happened with the media attention in the fall, I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with it. There's no pressure to say yes." Dylan thought about it carefully. The initial media frenzy had been overwhelming and had brought both wonderful support and painful criticism. But it had also amplified the message about kindness and community in ways he never could have managed alone. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Maybe talk to Grandma and, well, I'd like to ask Mr. Strait what he thinks too." "Of course. Take your time." They're flexible on timing. That evening, Dylan called George Strait. Over the past several months, they had developed an unlikely but genuine friendship. George called every few weeks to check in, and Dylan sent him updates on school and his volunteer work. They talked about music, life, loss, and hope. "The Today Show, huh?" George said when Dylan explained the situation. "That's a big platform. How do you feel about it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to say yes, because maybe it'll inspire more people to help each other. But part of me worries that it'll bring back all the negative attention. The people who said I was just looking for handouts." "Here's what I've learned," George said thoughtfully. "You can't control how people interpret your actions. You can only control your intentions and your integrity. If you go on that show, go because you believe in the message, not because you're seeking fame or validation. Go because you want to remind people that communities thrive when we take care of each other. If you go for the right reasons, the criticism won't matter as much. Do you think I should do it? I think you should do what feels authentic to you. But Dylan, I'll tell you this. Your story has already changed lives. I get letters and emails from people all over the country who heard about what happened in Brownwood. Parents telling me they've started teaching their kids that asking for help is okay. Communities telling me they've started their own kindness funds. Teachers saying they're using your example to talk about humility and generosity. Your story has power. If you're willing to share it again, more people will hear it. But only do it if you're ready. After the call, Dylan talked with his grandmother. Carol's perspective was simple and direct. "This is your choice, honey. I'll support whatever you decide. But remember why you started the Kindness Fund in the first place. Not to get recognition, but to help others. If going on television serves that purpose, then it might be worth the discomfort." Dylan decided to say yes. 3 weeks later, he and Carol flew to New York City. Dylan's first time on an airplane, his first time out of Texas. The Today Show staff was warm and professional, making sure they were comfortable and prepared. The interviewer, a kind woman named Rachel Hoffman, spent an hour talking with Dylan before the cameras rolled, helping him feel at ease. The live segment aired on a Tuesday morning in early June. Dylan sat on the famous orange couch, his grandmother beside him, and told his story once again. But this time, he focused less on the hardship and more on the lessons learned. "Mr. Strait didn't just give me a cake and a scholarship," Dylan said to Rachel and the millions of viewers watching. "He gave me permission to be honest about struggling. In our culture, we're taught to be strong, to handle everything on our own, to never show weakness. But I learned that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's courage. And when we're brave enough to admit we need help, we give other people the opportunity to be generous. That's a gift to them, too." Rachel asked about the Kindness Fund. Dylan explained how it started and how it had grown. We've helped 12 families so far, but it's not really about the number. It's about the principle. One act of kindness inspired another, which inspired another. That's how change happens. Not through big dramatic gestures, but through consistent, intentional compassion. What would you say to young people who are watching right now, who might be struggling like you were? Rachel asked. Dylan looked directly into the camera. I'd say that your circumstances don't define your worth. I'd say that asking for help is brave, not shameful. And I'd say that the hardest moments of your life can become the foundation for your greatest growth. If you let them. Don't waste your pain. Let it teach you. Let it make you kinder, stronger, more compassionate. That's how we honor the difficult parts of our journey. The segment ended with footage of Dylan volunteering at the nursing home, working with elementary students at the library, and serving meals at community dinners. The final shot showed him and his grandmother on their porch. The same porch where they had sat 2 years earlier, grieving and struggling, now smiling and hopeful. After the segment aired, Dylan's story went viral in ways the local news coverage never had. The hashtag, #JoshAskForWhatYouNeed, trended nationally. Schools across the country started their own kindness funds. George Strait's foundation received hundreds of scholarship applications from students inspired by Dylan's example. But perhaps most meaningfully, Dylan received thousands of letters and emails from people sharing their own stories. A single mother in Ohio wrote about finally having the courage to apply for food assistance after years of struggling in silence. A teenager in California talked about how Dylan's story had helped him open up to his parents about his depression. An elderly veteran in Florida described starting a neighborhood support network after watching the Today Show segment. Dylan read every letter he could, responding to as many as possible. Each story reminded him that vulnerability and authenticity created connection, that by being honest about his own struggles and needs, he had given others permission to do the same. As 7th grade ended and summer began, Dylan stood at a threshold. He had changed profoundly in the 9 months since that September afternoon when he had walked into Henderson's bakery and asked a question that would alter his life's trajectory. He was still the same person in many ways, still thoughtful, still kind, still focused on his studies, but he carried himself differently now. There was a confidence that came not from arrogance, but from knowing he had value, from understanding that his story mattered. On the last day of school, Travis Kimball, the 8th grader who had mocked Dylan in the cafeteria, approached him in the hallway. "Hey, Parker, got a minute?" Dylan tensed slightly, but nodded. "Sure." Travis looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I owe you an apology for what I said in the cafeteria, about you being a professional victim and all that. It was messed up. I was dealing with stuff at home. My dad's job situation, my parents fighting all the time, and I took it out on you. That wasn't right." Dylan relaxed. "I appreciate that, Travis. How are things at home now?" "Better, actually. My dad found work, and I talked to Mr. Cross about everything. He helped me realize I was angry at the situation, not at you. You were just an easy target." He paused. "The thing you said in the cafeteria about there being no shame in asking for help, it stuck with me. My family ended up going to one of those community dinners at Patricia's Diner. It helped us get through a rough month." "I'm glad," Dylan said sincerely. "That's what it's there for." Travis nodded. "Anyway, I'm heading to high school next year. Probably won't see you around much. But I wanted to say I'm sorry before I left." "You're all right, Parker." "You too, Travis. Good luck in high school." As Travis walked away, Dylan felt a sense of completion. The circle had closed in an unexpected way. Even his critics had become part of the larger story of transformation and growth. That evening, Dylan sat on the porch with his grandmother, watching the sun set over Brownwood. The air was warm and fragrant with honeysuckle. Carol had made lemonade, and they sipped it slowly, enjoying the peaceful end to a momentous day. "What are you thinking about?" Carol asked. "Everything," Dylan said. "How much has changed? How much I've changed." "You've grown up a lot this year," Carol agreed. "Sometimes I forget you're only 12. You seem older." "Sometimes I feel older," Dylan admitted, "but in a good way. Like, I've learned things that will help me for the rest of my life." Carol squeezed his hand. "Your parents would be so proud of you. I wish they could see the young man you're becoming." "I think they can," Dylan said quietly. "In whatever way that works, I think they know." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky shifted from orange to pink to purple. Fireflies began to appear in the yard, their tiny lights blinking like earthbound stars. Down the street, Dylan could hear children playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. This was home. This was family. This was the life that had been rebuilt from the ashes of tragedy, brick by brick, kindness by kindness. In his room later that night, Dylan made one final entry in the journal George Strait had given him at Christmas. "George Strait taught me that one person's kindness can change a life. But I've learned something else too. One life changed can change many lives. My story has touched people I'll never meet, in places I may never visit. That's the mathematics of compassion. It multiplies in ways we can't predict or control. Next year, I'll be in 8th grade. I'll keep studying, keep volunteering, keep growing. The summer program at Texas A&M starts in 2 weeks, and I'm nervous but excited. Grandma is healthier and happier than she's been in years. The Kindness Fund is thriving. Our little house on Elm Street feels like a home again. I still miss my parents every single day. I still wonder what life would have been like if they hadn't died. But I've learned that grief and gratitude can coexist. I can miss them while also appreciating the life I have now. I can honor their memory by living with intention, purpose, and compassion. If I could go back and talk to the Dylan from 9 months ago, the scared kid standing outside that bakery, ashamed to ask for an old cake, I'd tell him this: go ahead and ask. Be brave. Be honest. What you're about to experience will be hard sometimes, but it will also be beautiful. It will hurt, but it will heal. It will challenge you, but it will change you in all the best ways. Trust the kindness of strangers. Trust the strength of community. Trust that your story matters. And most importantly, trust that you are enough, exactly as you are. This is the end of one chapter and the beginning of the next. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm ready for it. I know that whatever comes, I won't face it alone. And I know that when I see someone else struggling, someone else ashamed to ask for help, I'll remember this year. I'll remember what George Strait did for me, and I'll do the same for them. The old cake I asked for would have been gone in a day or two, eaten and forgotten. The kindness I received instead, that will last a lifetime. That will ripple forward into the future, touching lives I can't yet imagine. This is my promise. I will pay it forward, every day, in every way I can, for as long as I live. This is my story, but it's also our story. Mine and Mr. Strait's, mine and Grandma's, mine and Brownwood's. It's a story about what happens when we're brave enough to be vulnerable and generous enough to respond to that vulnerability with compassion. Thank you to everyone who has been part of this journey. The story continues tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, and I can't wait to see where it leads. Dylan closed the journal and placed it carefully on his bedside table, next to the framed photograph of his parents. He turned off the light and lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of his grandmother moving through the house, preparing for bed. Outside, the Texas night stretched vast and star-filled above Brownwood. Somewhere out there, George Strait was probably on a stage, sharing his music with thousands of fans. In living rooms and kitchens across America, people were reading about Dylan's story, thinking about their own struggles and opportunities for kindness. In Brownwood, families were sitting down to dinners they could afford because of the Kindness Fund. Children were dreaming dreams made possible by community support, and lives were quietly transforming through acts of compassion, both large and small. And in a small bedroom on Elm Street, a 12-year-old boy who had once asked for an old cake drifted off to sleep, secure in the knowledge that he was loved, valued, and capable of changing the world, one act of kindness at a time. The story that began with a simple, humble question had become something extraordinary. Not because of fame or attention, but because it reminded people of a fundamental truth. We are all connected. We all struggle. And we all have the power to make each other's burdens a little lighter. That was the real gift George Strait had given Dylan Parker. Not money or opportunity, though those were important. The real gift was permission. Permission to be honest. Permission to ask for help. Permission to believe that his life had value and purpose. And Dylan would spend the rest of his life honoring that gift, sharing it with others, and proving that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply ask, "Would you have an old cake for my birthday?"